Today on the show, we're talking about buying a business out of state or at least, you know, some distance away from you. I'm going to be giving you some things to think about if you ever want to consider a deal like this.
I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses while controlling risk. So, if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So, be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win.
All right. So I get lots of questions over the course of the year asking me about, buying a business at someplace else. Sometimes we have people that are looking to buy a business and they get kind of frustrated. They can't find what they want, something that fits their box, specifically where they live. And they get the idea, hey, maybe I can go and find this business someplace else. And maybe they find one online for sale and they start to think, how could I feasibly pull off this acquisition? And usually it's with the idea that they don't want to move, right? They've got something keeping them in their home. Spouse, family, all this other kind of stuff goes on in their lives, and so they're thinking, how do I buy that business that's way over there in that other city or other state, while still living here? And so, just to be clear, today we're going to be talking about businesses that are local businesses that have a local footprint and serve people in a local area. So, for example, you could have a business that does online social media management for companies, and they might, the company might be based in a certain city because that's where the person who started it lived, and they hired some local people there. But everyone's working from home, and they're serving clients all across the country. Like, we're not talking about that kind of business because very easily you could see how you'd be able to run that kind of business. What I'm talking about is the business with a physical presence. So we're talking about, tire shops, we're talking about, bathroom renovation companies, stuff like that, where there are people in the local area doing the work for customers in the local area. So I've created some bullet points and talking points here that we're going to be going through of things that you want to think about if you are aspiring to do a deal like this, just so that you don't have as many blind spots that might come out and grab you. So we're going to start with number one, and that is understanding the market and local dynamics. So it is very easy to think that if you are familiar with a certain industry where you live, that a lot of what you know and you experience is the same over there, wherever that happens to be. Okay. And so things vary from place to place, especially when you're talking about big countries like Canada or the United States, right? I can tell you, I live here on the east coast of Canada. There is a lot of stuff that is very different here than in Alberta, for example. In Alberta, local businesses have to have business licenses issued by towns and cities. Here in the Maritimes, that doesn't exist, right? Just like little things like that. So you are going to have to understand that when you find this prospective business, you're probably going to have to go through some kind of due diligence process, not just on the business, but on just understanding the place, the market, and how it might be different from where you live, right? I just be aware of the blind spot, right? Because you could do a deal and then later find out that there's some fundamental difference about the way things happen in within the same industry between two different places. And I'm sure people down below in the comments will give you some examples of how things might vary from one place to another. Different parts of the country are going to have different economic and demographic trends that could have an impact on the business if your intention is to hold it for a longer period of time. You can probably tell a lot about the future demand for a certain kind of business based on the overall demographic trends, right? Are the people there in that market getting older? Or is the market sort of a place where new people to the country, new immigrants tend to go first before they disperse into other places? So, one is going to have maybe issues with aging population. The other could have a constant supply of people that are fairly young, right? And that would could be important for some industries. Um, Question your biases that relate to where you live. So, if you live in a big city, if you're an urban dweller and you might be tempted to buy a business in a smaller community, think about the things that you may be assuming. So, I'll give you a quick example, and this is from a real life example. So, I had a chance to do some consulting work with somebody in the grocery industry, and this was a small regional grocery chain, and they were having some turnover of ownership within I guess it's sort of a franchise model that they had going on, as well as their own stores. And what their expert who I dealt with told me is he said for some of their small town grocery stores, they had determined it was critically important for whoever became the owner of that store to live in that small town. So he gave the example like you've got to live in the small town, you've got to be in the store, you've got to meet the people, you need to attend a local church if you're a churchgoer, you need to enroll your kids in the local hockey team if that's what you're doing, because it is important for you to be in these different places in the community and see all the people and wave and smile and say hi, and then sort of close that loop by smiling and meeting the people in your own store and being a part of that whole community feeling, because they had had experience with people coming from the outside buying these local small town stores and then saying, I don't want to live in the small town, I want to live in the city that's an hour away, and not doing very well at all, right? So that would be the kind of consideration. Urban versus rural. In an urban environment, you know you don't know who the grocery store manager is. You can go in there all the time and have different employees, and it doesn't really mean anything to you. In a smaller setting, it could be a very different sort of thing. So that's understanding market dynamics. The second thing the topic I have on my list here is legal and regulatory considerations. So I already mentioned the thing about the business permits. Licensing permits, the way things are done can vary greatly from one state to another, or from one province to another. So you're going to have to do some research and make sure that you understand exactly what these differences are. Things like employment laws can be different from one jurisdiction to another. Tax implications. I'm going to be talking a little bit later about travel expense considerations, but I want to give you an example. So um, you, for example, could buy a business that is in another state, but it might just be an hour's drive away from you. Okay. So if you buy that business and that's your business and that's where the business occurs, and you want to go to the business to do something, some management stuff, you might drive an hour, right? So is that a business expense, driving an hour? I'm not a CPA, so I'm not an expert. And if I get this wrong and you're a CPA, put the comment down below. But in my mind, that's commuting, right? And commuting is not an expense for tax purposes, right? That's just, you paying for fuel to get yourself over to work. And so maybe if you're going to buy that business that's an hour drive away, when you set up the legal structure, maybe you actually want to have a business where you live. Maybe that business could be based out of a local co-working space where you receive mail, but that's an office in your city. And the business you buy an hour away is now another business location. And maybe that's a second business you own, or maybe it is a branch of the business you own in your local area. But if you go to your local office and then your business needs require you to travel to the other location, now that's business travel, right? That to me, that's a business expense. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And so these kinds of things you want to make sure that you have set up correctly, that you understand, that you structure things in the right way to maximize potential tax efficiencies, right? Okay. So let's move on here to number three. So financial evaluation and due diligence. So obviously, we talk all the time about evaluating businesses, making sure we have the right price, looking at all that kind of stuff, examining the cash flow. So when you are doing all of those due diligence things and looking at cash flows, and hey, if you're not quite sure how to do a cash flow, head over to bizplanschool.com. That's where I teach people cash flow forecasting. Um, if you are, um, looking at this business and it's got a local owner and you're going to buy it and you live away and the business is then going to have to face the burden of added travel costs, then you want to make sure you build that into your model so that you know that the business can in fact afford I give the example just a moment ago of driving an hour, but what if you have to fly 2 hours, right? And what if you were contemplating that you're going to spend a certain amount of time there every month? Well, now you're starting to talk about thousands of dollars worth of airline tickets every year. Where are you going to stay when you're there? Are you just going to fly there for the day, or are you going to spend a couple days? Right now, you're talking about hotel costs, and I've heard I've heard lots of podcasts, interviews with business people who bought a business in another community, and they've ended up, for example, renting an apartment in that community because that overall was the cheaper thing to do, rather than have all the hotel expense. So, but you want to build in an idea of what those expenses are going to be into your cash flow forecast to make sure that the business acquisition is still going to work for you. So that would be the way that we would impact our financial evaluation and due diligence with respect to out of town. Um, Number four, building a local team. So if, in most small businesses, if there's some kind of crazy emergency or unforeseen problem, the owner steps in and manages it and just does it. But if you're not there, who's going to do that? Right. So you need to make sure that you have management and staff, since you're not going to be there. And they have to be capable, and they have to be empowered, and they have to understand what the limits of their power are, right? Um, so if there is an existing team there that is quite capable already, you want to make sure that you retain these people in the transition, and that could involve getting them involved before the actual deal closes, so that you can create some kind of structure, bonus, retention bonus, or something like that. Um, you know, I have there's a someone in the group coaching program who has acquired several businesses that are remote to where he lives, and one of his key criteria is simply that if the business has to have a second in command person that can obviously be the person that steps into that general manager role in the local place, and if he can't identify that person, he just won't buy the business, right? And so um, again, you're talking about your team. I will also say that you can establish a local network. I call them spies and agents. So if that local business, for example, has a local supplier, let's say a wholesale distributor, and they're selling stuff, you can meet that supplier, the owner of that company, and you can make it your mission to become really friendly with that person. You get to know them, etc. And then, tap into them as far as the local grapevine, right? Like, you can say to that person, "Hey, if anyone ever shares any rumors or makes any comments or says anything about my business when you are talking with people, please, 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 send that comment on to me." I have a friend who is a real estate agent here locally, and who has sold some apartment buildings, for example, to people up in Toronto, and they keep in contact with him. And every once in a while, he might get a phone call from one of them saying, "Hey, would you mind driving by this building I own and just let me know if anything looks fishy, because the tenant's not returning my messages and all this kind of thing." And so this real estate agent's driving around all day. He can certainly just drive by, and if the front lawn's full of garbage and broken furniture, that's something the owner might want to know, right? And so you want to have a plan for that. How are you going to be able to create a local network of friends that you might need to call upon occasionally to get some kind of feedback? Um, which leads me into number five, uh, technology and remote management tools. So it's easier than ever to have your own set of eyes right on the business, right? You can have all these electronic video cameras that are installed that you can access through the internet, etc. So this might be something that you have to upgrade when you do this acquisition. So can you see the business? Can you look into it? Can you see what's going on? How about things like point of sale, right? You want to make sure you have a point of sale system that has some kind of login on the back end, some kind of cloud-based solution where you can log in and see the activity that's going on. Um, the There are businesses that sometimes get listed for sale by business brokers on websites, and they'll use the term absentee owned. So imagine somebody who owns a tire shop for 30 years, and they know everything about the tire business, and they got some trusted employees, and they decide, I'm going to spend my winters in Florida. And so now this person is going to Florida for 4 months at a stretch every winter, and goes to sell the business eventually, and it gets advertised as absentee owned because the owner is away. It's not really absentee owned because what is actually happening is the owner can log into his cameras and see what's going on in the shop. They can log into the point of sale system and see what the activity is in the business. And because they know everything about that tire shop, they can phone the person they left in charge. They can have a conversation with that person. They know exactly what to ask. They know, exactly what kinds of things might go wrong. And so they are able to remotely manage that business. And that is very different from someone who's never owned a tire shop, buying that tire shop, living in another city, and then thinking that they're going to pull off the same thing. And so, while these technology and remote management tools are important, we can never lose sight of the fact that industry expertise is really important. And I've had a few clients over the years who have managed to buy a business in another city and turn it into something they could remotely manage. But usually it required them to invest, 6, 8, 12 months of spending a lot of time in that business because oftentimes they have to build the systems and processes, some of which we're going to get into here next. So, number 6, travel and physical presence. So, in contemplating doing an out of town deal, you want to perhaps set a regular travel schedule. And like I just mentioned, it could mean that you spend the first 3 months there almost all the time. But most people that I know will then start to tune down the cadence of that travel. And they might say, I'm going to spend a couple days every second week. And then all of a sudden it's 3 days a month and it tunes down even more. And I've known people that own businesses in remote locations that try to get there like once a year, kind of thing. It all depends on how well you execute this structure of local management and your ability to give your owner input, but to do it, for example, over Zoom or the telephone versus actually having to be there on your own. Um, if it require like if you can't figure out how to make it go, then it should be something in the cons column, like a reason not to buy. Um, Lots of people buy a business in another place and move there. Um, if you can't see a solution to this, you probably shouldn't do it. One of the things that I've often counseled people to do who are considering doing an out of business acquisition is to think about an airport strategy. So, what does this mean? Well, if you go to your local airport website, I'm not talking about the airline, I'm talking about the airport itself. Many airports on their websites will have a list of all the airlines that serve the airport and a list of all the destinations you can fly to directly, right? And so whether it's, on many, it could be many different airlines, but I will often say to people, figure out where you can fly to directly without having to do any kind of connection, and maybe limit your search to those cities because adding a connection just adds another entire layer of complexity to this project, right? Because now you're talking about greater opportunities for missed connections, storm delays, lost baggage, all that kind of stuff that you don't run into in a direct point to point flight. So I I think that's smart. Anyway, all right. Number 7, operational risks, or more importantly, mitigating them. So, in the case of a regular business that has an owner look nearby, if there's some kind of emergency like a flood or a hurricane or something like that, the owner makes decisions about what to do. Like the emergency plan is just do what the owner says, right? So if you're not going to be there, though, you need to have much more formalized emergency and disaster plans for the business. This could mean another layer of sort of insurance planning too, written protocols for dealing with local crises, and this is very important. Is your staff has to really know what they have the authority to do or not do, right, as part of that plan. There could be a communications breakdown. You may not be able to reach those people. You need to know that if a big storm goes through and there's power and communications outages, that there is somebody who's going to be doing something like just making sure that the premises have been secured, right? That things are locked, that someone's going to go by and check it as part of this plan. And so, you may have a manager, for example, of the business, but they might live half an hour away from the business on the other side of a big river, let's say. And one of the things that might happen, for example, is maybe this river could flood if there's a bad storm. So maybe this emergency plan or this emergency operational plan is to have another employee who isn't the manager but just happens to live down the road. Maybe they have a specific role to play if there's a natural disaster coming along, where it's going to be their job just to come and try to check on the business every few hours or something like that, right? Um, I haven't written one of these plans, but again, this is just a list of things to think about if you're going to contemplate buying a business in a remote place. Um, Local regulatory changes. So, one of the things that happens for all of us as business people is you're living your life, and certain things make it to the news, right? So, if the government's thinking about changing the sales tax rate where you live, you will almost certainly hear about it. But if you buy a business that's a 3-hour flight away, you might not be part of the or privy to the conversations that are happening in the local business community. And there can be things happening that have an impact on you that you're completely ignorant of, right? So most people who are buying a small Main Street business, for example, they'll scratch together their resources, they'll borrow money, and they'll buy one business, and with hopes sometimes of doing more or building upon that. But if you are going to make a big investment and buy one business and it's going to be a huge part of your total personal portfolio or personal net worth, then you have to be taking care of that business. So if it's in another jurisdiction, then you might want to consider, for example, subscribing to the online source of news for that area. So if there's like a local newspaper that you can do an online subscription to, then you might want to do that. So you can be plugged in to what's happening in the local community and be aware of changes that are coming up where your business is. Almost have to go out of your way to make it your business to kind of be informed like a local person might be, who's just going to be bumping into this information in their everyday life. Number 8, establishing brand consistency. So when you are present as an owner in your local business and you overhear one of your employees talking with a customer and you don't like the way it sounds, you can then take a coaching moment and you can go talk to that employee and you can just like say, hey, this is the way we address people. This is what we like to say, or what have you. If you're not going to be present, then all the little, shine and polish stuff that is going to be part of how you want the business to be represented in the community has to be put into some kind of systemized process so that there's a way to ensure that this is happening. So think franchises, right? Franchises will create a brand and they'll have a marketing strategy that includes what a person's experience is supposed to be like when they go into that franchise location. And so this is the kind of thing that you're going to have to make sure you implement in your business. How do we make sure that our employees are being greeted the way we want? How do we ensure that the experience is the same way every time? And so you're going to have policies, procedures, training on a regular basis, and refresher training to make sure that people are actually adhering to this stuff. And then you need some kind of accountability loop where you figure out, how am I going to make sure that the people are doing this? That it's not just a self-reporting system where people say, yeah, 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 I do that, when they don't, right? So what does that mean then? Does it mean having like secret shoppers or something? Does it mean that you have to figure out a way to like spy on people? Like you're gonna tune in on the video cameras and listen to people? Maybe, I don't know, right? Again, this is stuff that you need to think about when you're thinking about buying a business in another place. Um, our last one, is it the last one? Yeah, last one. Number 9, exit strategy. So when you buy a business, most people have some kind of idea of what the exit's going to look like, whether or not you think you're going to own it for 5 years or 20 years or what have you. Um, I think that one of the best things about doing this, if you decide to pull this off, is if you go through all the effort of making it into a truly remote, manageable business, I think you're going to make it much more marketable, and there would be a far wider audience of people to appeal to when it comes time to selling it. Because not only can you tell them you live away, like that example I gave before of the guy who runs his business from Florida, but you can actually show them all of these systems and things that you've built and show them what your time is actually like when you are managing the business from your home, right? So you can share with them, like, I do the emails, I return phone calls to suppliers, to the banks, or whatever. Like, you can give them your job description and then show them how the rest of the business is managed through systems, processes, and some of the tools that you have. And then you can sell it to somebody who lives anywhere, right? So it can really be great. If you're frightened of the prospect of trying to do all this stuff, but you still wanna go and buy that local business, then maybe you should be considering some kind of operational partner sort of scenario, where there's somebody who is local, who has skin in the game just like you do, who's actually going to be there and can be the person that fills these gaps, right? And that's a model that people have used as well, over and over again successfully for years. Um but yeah, I mean, um, and then there's local support networks that you can build, local advisors and mentors, et cetera, who understand the market. Should be something that you consider as well. Anyway, I hope that was useful. Let me know down below in the comments if you have bought a business that was in a location remote to where you live, and just what the reality was like. Like, uh, did you have to spend 6 or 9 months almost living there before you got things set up, or did you buy, like the person in the group coaching program that I told you about? Did you buy a business that had an apparent, person that could be promoted into that leadership role? I'd be curious to hear what your experiences are. Anyway, if you want to learn about buying a business, as always, head over to businessbuyeradvantage.com. You can learn all about our services, the things I do with clients, what we help them with. You can learn about our online training program that will help you understand how to do this and help you avoid bad deals. It's the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.